Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Drew, and JC is back after missing yesterday's recording. We are here with I don't want to call it an exciting conclusion, but a continuation because I feel like we have a lot of miles left in these conversations. But we are once again being joined by Lynn Monet. And after the intro, she's going to go ahead and pick up where we left off from episode one with her.
Welcome to the Watchers Podcast Network, the only source for film, TV, horror, music, pro wrestling, stand-up comedy, and the paranormal, all in one channel. If you're a fan of our shows, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.
What is the best? You got the best, the hardest part in the world.
All right, that's super cringe.
There's nothing cringe about it. It is perfect 2004 nostalgia trip, everything about it, which is exactly what we're going for here on a paranormal podcast inspired by Art Bell and Coast to Coast. So, Lynn, how are you
Hey, Lynn.
doing tonight?
What's up?
I am doing great. I'm so happy to be asked back, and I was really looking forward to getting to chat with you guys tonight.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We've been looking forward to this. I told you before
100%.
we started recording that this is essentially the first time that we've had somebody come back to continue a story. We've done one or two episodes that just happened to go like 2 hours long that we cut into two episodes, but you're at the actual first person that we
First
had
one.
on, and we're like, we need more of that, and we need to
Yeah.
finish that conversation. So let's
Dude, I think Drew can attest to this. When we ended our conversation last time, I was so into your story that I was like, we need to stay up to like 4 a.m. and keep this going. Like we can't.
Did you sleep with the lights on?
No, but I have some big bad beagles that protect me, so
No doubt, and they will.
I did pee the bed though.
Uh-oh.
that's just his usual routine, though.
Your secret's safe with me. I won't tell anybody.
Yeah.
That's funny. Blame it on the dog. Put the dog in bed with you. Blame it on the dog.
The dog.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully, I mean, some of the listeners may have also peed the bed, because that was a pretty wild and intense story of the house. And we ended right around the new owners buying it and not believing you about the situation, and
Baptists.
and then went on to, I think you said within 6 months, ended up selling the house anyway. And so I think that's about where we can pick up now. And are we still in the first Omnipresent book, or will the conversation now kind of slide into the second one?
It will be sliding into the second one. Definitely. Omnipresent, What Happened Next. I wrote the book Omnipresent, What Happened Next, because so many people, after reading the first book, were concerned. They wanted to know what happened to me, what happened to the family, and what happened to the house, for that matter, and the people that bought the house. So I went ahead and I wrote the second book. Just to step back just a little bit to bring people forward. Again, I did try to tell the people that tried to purchase the house from me, and of course, they didn't want to hear what I had to say, and I would have been honest with them. I couldn't, I couldn't do to them what had been done to me. So, I did try to tell them, but what had happened is about 6 months later, I was going down the interstate in the direction of that house, and there was a backup on the interstate. So I just so happened to get off of on the ramp that was the same ramp that led to the house, but to get around to go forward and try to get back on the interstate ahead so that I could like dodge the backup. And it just so happened that I'm cutting through these neighborhoods, and I happened to get on a street that wasn't familiar with me, but I ended up on the street that passed my street. So I'm on that street, and as I'm driving past, I'm noticing I'm passing the street that the house is on. It was the second house in on the left. And I'm noticing that there is a sign in the front yard, and the yards were pretty big. So I couldn't tell for sure whether the sign was in the neighbor's yard on the edge or the yard of the house that I sold. And curiosity got me. So I pull over into the next street, and I turn around and I sit at the stop sign and I say a prayer. And I said, please, you know, protect me for one thing. And I don't want, I'm trying to be, I turned my radio off. I was trying to be very, very quiet. I wanted to be very inconspicuous because I surely didn't want the people to notice me and come out and invite me in, because I definitely wasn't going to go back in that house. So I turned around after I said my prayer, went to the street, made my turn. Now this was a dead end street. And I turned in and I passed the house, and sure enough, it is a for sale by owner sign. And I had to make sure of what the sign was. And of course, my heart just sunk into my stomach in that moment, because I really, really had hoped that whatever belief system that they had really would protect them. I really wanted good things for them in this house. So when I saw that, I knew that there must have been problems. I was assuming that they were moving out because of spiritual problems. They were a retired couple, and this was going to be their retirement home. So I couldn't imagine any other reason. So I continued down the street to the end of the street, and I turned around. And as I'm coming back slowly in front of the house, my radio turns on full blast. It's blaring. I can't get it to turn off. I can't get the channel to change. I can't get it to do anything. So I sped up. I mean, I literally left skid marks getting off that street because I did not want to be noticed. And as soon as I got off and went around the corner, I turned onto the other street. The radio then, after like 30 seconds, shut itself off, or even less than 30 seconds, shut itself off. And to me, that was as if it was like a calling card, that the spirits knew I was there, and they wanted for me to know that they were still there too. Now, in the as I had mentioned before in the previous book, there were two demons and a young man that had hung himself in the house. The young man did get crossed over during one of the times that I had people there, were trying to help me clear the house of the spirits. And but the two demons were still there. So I went ahead and I left. And I was curious. I thought to myself, if the people before me sold the house, obviously they couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay there. Now the people that I've sold the house to can't stay there. So I reached out. I went through the court records and found the documentation for the house sale and all of that, and reached out to the family that had sold me the house, especially since a lot of the things with the sale of the house didn't match what they said. Like they said that, they had to move to relocate for jobs, and that they were, motivated sellers because now they're paying for two mortgages, and that they were out of state basically. And all of that turned out not to be true. They were still working at the same job, and they had only moved like 20 minutes away to live with the mother's parents' house. So I finally found them, and I took a chance, and I wrote a letter, because that was like, now almost 20 years ago, and old school. So I wrote a letter hoping that I would get a response. And I waited, and it was maybe, several weeks to a month. And I get this phone call from the husband. And I told him, I said, look, I'm not holding you responsible for anything, but some strange things happened in that house. And I wanted to know, the house is haunted. And he's kind of hesitating. He's like, haunted? really? And I'm like, yes, really. I've had things happen to my children, and I wanted to know if anything happened to your family. And he said, well, I think you need to speak to my wife. So he told me that he would have her call me back, and 2 weeks passed. I didn't think I was going to hear from her. And she finally calls, and she's the first thing on the phone is, before she even identified who she was, she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I told my husband when we found out that you had children that I didn't want to sell you the house. She says, that's why we were late to the closing. And I'm so sorry. And I'm like, well, look, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not living there anymore, but I wanted to talk to you about what happened to your family and children. And she went on to tell me that she had two children. One was 4, one was 6. And of course, they had only lived there for 6 months out of the year that they owned it. They ended up moving. She and her husband almost ended up getting a divorce because of some of the things that were happening, like the water turning itself on, and he would blame her and she would deny doing it, or she would blame him. And neither one was doing it. The ghosts in the house were turning the water on. But of course, they were accusing each other of it, and they were getting into fights over different things. Of the husband worked during the night and was home sleeping during the day, and he would hear knocking on the door or her voice in the house, or they both were feeling things crawling in bed with them, right before they ended up bolting out of the house themselves. But so there were several things that had happened, but she told me that even with her kids, that they were showing up with mysterious bite marks, bruise marks. And the one little girl would talk about how the things downstairs didn't like her. And of course, they thought that she was talking about an imaginary friend. And but yet this imaginary friend sounded really creepy, but they just figured she had a vivid imagination. And even with that, the children would go to school. And of course, 4 and 6 years old, your teacher asks you to draw a picture of your house and your family. And they make the little stick people in the house with the flower as big as the house. And in their pictures, both children would draw, but then off to the side or somewhere else in the picture, these stick figures of these creepy looking dark things with like blood coming from their mouth and big teeth were on there. And when people would ask them what those were, they would say, those are the monsters that live in my house downstairs. So the children were seeing all of this. And so we had kind of gotten into a conversation that way. And after I spoke with her about the house, and she went on to tell me about it almost ruining her marriage, that the children didn't want to go back there. They kept begging to go and stay at the grandparents' house. They didn't want to come and stay there either. They were afraid. And the mother, of course, was sleeping with the children at night in the house by herself because the husband was working most of the time. And it just, one thing happened after another. So with that, I hung up with her, and I asked her if we could speak again at another time, and she never responded to my calls after that. So it was interesting that I then started talking about it and telling people about it, and I started getting stories about that particular area that people were coming back to me with, and I'll be happy to share those with you if you'd like.
Yeah. I guess this can only be speculation, but do you wonder if maybe the reason she quit reaching out to you after that initial conversation was perhaps uh, maybe an uptick in new activity for them? Or after that conversation, did you happen to have any kind of residual activity as well? Or not? Maybe I'm just kind of creating a situation that didn't exist.
No, in that house, when I left, I salted everything, including my children's toys. Where I was returning, there were no issues. It was that house that was the problem. And of course, me driving past it aggravated it because they could feel everything is energy. They could feel me energetically there. And with them being able to turn on my radio and stuff like that, it let me know that they were still there. So, I mean, I consistently seen things. I have the gift of second sight. I did have another period of time where I ended up, lo and behold, I mean, go figure, how could this happen twice to somebody in a lifetime, where I ended up having to move into a townhouse without being able to go in and check it the way that I normally would. I was kind of thrown into it last minute, and come to find that there was a male ghost that was going from townhouse to townhouse, pulling down women's underwear and getting in bed with them at night in a row of 10 townhouses. Every single one of them was affected. The whole building was haunted. So with that, I had to learn how to not only clear it, because the ghosts can go through the wall or go through the floor ceiling if it's a 2-story deal. And I had to learn how to be able to clear it and to block them from coming back in there. And that's in my next book, Omnipresent, 111 Becca Dawn Drive, which I'll be happy to talk a little bit about at the end. So I have had other experiences, but I did not have any more experiences with those demonic things in that house. However, they do know me by name. So, yeah, I mean, once you have been exposed to that kind of thing, you're kind of haunted yourself.
Yeah,
So, I
I
mean,
get
if
that.
you're into if you're into this kind of stuff, you're haunted anyway. So, and they know who you are. So, yeah, but what I did do was I had gone back to have the insurance taken off of the house since I had sold it, to put it back on to the mobile home that I had been living in, and I was moving back into. And the lady, she asked me, she said, well, what happened? I thought you were so happy with the house that you found, and da 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, I said, but the house had issues. It was haunted. And she just looked at me, and I said to her, so I started to tell her the story about some of the things that happened. And ironically, this lady, she was working in an office that was kind of like a home office. So her mother-in-law was there. Her mother-in-law steps into the room, and she's listening to me talking about the story. And she said to me, she said, where was this house? And I said, well, it was in East Flat Rock, North Carolina. And she said, no wonder. She said, you couldn't give me $1 million and a free house to move into any houses over there. That whole place is haunted. Well, I had moved from Florida, so I didn't know the area was haunted. And she said, when you're finished telling your story, I've got a story to tell you. And she started to tell me a story about her best friend who had gone through a bad divorce, bought a house in East Flat Rock, similar areas. Matter of fact, it was only about 4 blocks from the house that I had bought. It was in walking distance of the house that I had bought and sold. And she was telling me the story about how her best friend had gone through a nasty marriage and divorce, but now she had found this wonderful man, and they had gotten married, and they bought this house together in East Flat Rock. And she said that her friend had called her and asked her to help her go to the store to pick up this long table for her foyer. So she went along to help her lift it and get it into the house. And before they went, she met the lady at the house, and before they went to leave, she asked if she could use the lady's bathroom. And she goes into the bathroom, and as she's sitting on the toilet, and she can hear like footsteps overhead, but this is a 1-story house. So she's like, man, either she's got big rats or something in her attic, but something, it sounded like footsteps. So she even opened the door and called out into the hallway, and thought maybe her friend had come in the house, and it was just echoing because the house didn't have a lot of furniture in it yet, and thought maybe it was, it was kind of echoey. So, and nobody answered. And when she went back outside, she said to her friend, she said, were you in the house? And she said, no. And she said, well, man, it sounds like somebody was walking around in your attic. And the friend said, well, we've been hearing things too. She said, we even had an exterminator come and check, and they didn't find anything. And she said, but there have been some things, that noises and things in the house that have been kind of occurring. We're trying to figure out where they're coming from. And again, she didn't feel that they were ghost related. So they picked up the table at the store. They came back, they brought it into the foyer, and her friend invited her to stay for dinner. and she agreed to stay. And the husband came home of her friend, and he was sitting on a couch. They had two couches that were facing each other with a coffee table in the middle. One was up against the windowed wall, and the other one, the back, was open to the dining room and the kitchen where her friend was cooking. So they were all kind of talking together, but the husband was sitting across from the friend, and they were talking, and he had his arm up on the back of the couch. And she said that they were in this conversation, and all of a sudden he stopped talking, and he looks over at his hand, and she said to me, she said, if I had not seen this with my own eyes, I would have never believed it. And she said that the man's wedding ring literally slid off of his finger, twirled in the air, and then dropped onto the floor and rolled off all by itself. And she said that she didn't even stay for dinner, that she left. And of course they left and went and slept in a hotel that night because it disturbed them. They then went and tried to get people to come in and clear the house. They realized that, these things that were happening were of a more malevolent nature, and thought that the house was clear. And one night the wife is sleeping in the house, and the husband is working later, and she fell asleep, and she wakes up and she sees all of these faces standing around the bed looking at her, and she couldn't get out of the house fast enough. And that was the last night that anybody slept in that house. So so she was telling me this story about her friend in one of the houses in that area. So I started kind of checking around, and there were several other stories too of very, very bizarre things that had occurred. I spoke to one lady, literally, whose daughter and her husband was a newly graduated attorney in the area of East Flat Rock. They had purchased a house together. She was pregnant with her first baby. And not to go into too much detail with it, but one of the main things that had happened is there was this one door that kept to the basement that kept opening by itself. And so the husband kept trying different things, to fix it so that it wouldn't open. They thought maybe it was just, they even had engineers or whatever you want to call it come over to check the foundation of the house to see if maybe it was shifting or there was some kind of a problem that would make that door open, and they couldn't find a problem with it. They actually came up with something really stupid because they lived close to the interstate. They were saying, oh, well, there's this truck that must pass at this certain time, and that's what's causing your door to open. Because there was one day that and I'll call the grandmother Phyllis, that Phyllis was there with her daughter, and the daughter, she made mention of the door opening in the kitchen, and the daughter's like, yeah, the funny thing is it seems to open every night at exactly 9:00. So Phyllis and her husband are sitting at the breakfast table in the kitchen, anticipating it to open the very next night. And they're sitting there and they're waiting. 9:00 comes, the door's not open. But then at about 30 seconds after, not even a full minute after, the door opens by itself. And that's when they got the people to come over to check the foundation and things like that. And they had assumed that there was a truck route that was going down the interstate that was causing a vibration through the ground that would cause that. So they paid all of this money to have some person tell them that, which of course that wasn't the reason at all. So the thing that was ironic about this one is there was a ghost in the house. And literally at one point, it levitated the baby. I kid you not. The woman had then had her baby. She had a little baby girl, and levitated the baby from the family room upstairs to the master bedroom into the bassinet when it was newborn. What had happened is the new mother was downstairs in the family room folding laundry, and the baby was in a cradle next to the couch, and she had turned away to go upstairs to talk to her mother for a minute and put milk in the refrigerator. And all of a sudden she hears the baby fussing and crying, but it sounds like it's coming down the hallway in the master bedroom. So when she comes back downstairs to the family room, because again, this was a split level house, comes down to the family room, the baby's not in the cradle. Now, the only two people in the house are the grandmother and the new mother and the baby. So immediately she's panicking, thinking that someone is coming to the house through the back doors, the back French doors, and she checked them, but they were locked. None of the windows appeared to be open, so they called the police. She was even afraid to go up into the master bedroom to even check on her child, who was making noises at that time, because she thought that maybe whoever it was that carried the child from the downstairs to the upstairs was waiting to attack them if they walked into the bedroom. So the police did come. Yeah. So the police did come. They came into the house. They went all through the house, and there was nobody in the house. And of course, the new mom runs in immediately and picks up the baby in the master bedroom in the bassinet. And the policeman just basically kind of made her feel like she was crazy. Oh, well, lack of sleep. It's a new baby. You might have carried the baby up there and didn't remember doing it. They blamed it on her.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when the little baby turned 2, she had this invisible friend that she was talking to. And finally, one day, the mother asked, she said, Emily, she said, who are you talking to? And she says, Marianne. And she's like, Marianne, she says, Marianne, does Marianne live here? She says, yes, she's been here since ever I can remember. It turned out then they went back into files as far as they could, and found that where their house was built originally was a jail. Back a long, long time ago, was a jail. And underneath the jail, they were performing illegal abortions. There was a young woman named Mariana that passed away during that time, and she was lingering around the child, kind of looking for her own child. Needless to say, they ended up moving, and once they moved, little Emily didn't talk about Mariana anymore. So I don't even know what happened with that, but there are so many things that a lot of people came to me with stories after that were very, very eye-opening, for that matter, and also showing some of the things that these demonic entities can actually do. I mean, they can leave bruise marks, they can leave bite marks, they can pull your hair, they can pull your clothes down at night and your underwear down, they can pull your nightgown up, they can pull your covers off, they can leave claw marks that are raised and can actually bleed, they can push you up against something, they can knock a person over. And I believe there's no medical reason for SIDS with this. I have had them touch me. Yeah,
that's a connection right there. Yeah.
I know exactly where you're going with that, and that's terrifying. And not something that I ever considered until right this second. Now that
right this second.
Yeah. That's heavy.
It is, but they don't have a medical reason for it. They don't have
correct.
They think it's something, but I can tell you, after being touched by them, pushed by them, have my own hair pulled by them, I've been attacked by them, they can push with enough power that it would be very, very easy for them to suffocate a child on their stomach, a newborn baby. They can't even raise their head. They would have the strength to do that. And the thing is too, is they kind of know ahead of time, sometimes because of the light that comes from the child, that maybe they're here for a special purpose or something like that. But the main thing is they feed off of the lush that the emotional trauma that is caused from the death of a person and a child, that ripples that they eat off of like their chocolate, and it enables them to do more physical acts. So they feed off of that for a very, very long time. The depression, the sadness, the sorrow, the anger, all of the things that go with suffering a loss. So they do these things to feed themselves, to get that energetic thing going on. But I believe that it's a huge possibility that could be one of the reasons. So
I think some of the most terrifying accounts and stories that come from these illegal abortions that happened, or unplanned abortions, and especially the ones where the mother passes away as well during the event.
Procedure.
Yeah, the procedure. Yeah, you got it. So I can definitely see that, and I think that the SIDS topic is something that we're gonna have to discuss
Yeah,
further at some point. It's a very
that's
dark topic,
we're gonna have to explore it.
but it's very. I mean, like you're right. There really aren't medical explanations for it. There are theories, and there are what people think, but there's nothing proven. Like it's just something that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it's written off of, you know. So
Yeah. I not to get off on like a whole SIDS thing, but my son when he was first born,
burn, burn.
I talk on podcasts. You'd think I might be able to actually use words. When he was born, um, he had issues with drainage and stuff, and eventually we come to find out that so he has a birth defect, essentially a medical condition that is right in the orbital bone.
Mm-hmm.
And as a baby, it was affecting it in the sense that like it was causing constant drainage. So he actually, to a point, was choking at night because of it. And so, like, until we had it figured out, I was having him sleep up on me, and I was essentially like holding him upright when we would go to bed at night. And when I was talking to the doctor, I expressed my concerns, and the exact words out of this woman's mouth were, "Sometimes SIDS just happens," and
Sorry,
What?
sometimes it happens. Yeah.
Wow.
that was the medical explanation. It's like, hey, sometimes it happens.
And babies
So
and even toddlers are so fragile. Like you even accidentally bump them in the head, like it's over.
yeah,
Well,
And
exactly. And the thing about toddlers too is when they fall, they don't know to put their hands forward to block the fall.
so
So they
they
just
just go
go
head
head in,
first. Yeah.
exactly. And they do, there was also a person that was talking about, and this is just off the beaten path a little bit too, but on the same line, there was a lady on, was it on the Montel show when Sylvia Brown was on the shows, and she brought pictures. She started talking about a house that she had inherited that was her aunt's house, and she remembered going to the aunt's house as a child, and that there was this one chair, a rocking chair, that would always move itself out into the hallway during the nighttime. So they knew that there was some kind of activity there. But of course, oh, well, it's your guardian angel, or it's your Aunt Lulu coming to check on you. But yet they don't bother to think that if it was Aunt Lulu or their guardian angel, it wouldn't be scaring the bejesus out of the kids, shaking the bed and pulling the covers off and shoving a chair out into the hallway. They
Right.
don't they don't scare people like that. If it's something scary or telling you the child to do something that they know they're not supposed to, then it's not Aunt Lulu or their guardian angel. But she was talking about this chair being pushed out into the hallway. So again, they knew that there were some issues with the house. And so before she was a single mother, she had a child, and at this time, I don't remember if it was a male or female child, but it was a child, and the child was around 3 years old. And she wanted the house blessed. So she had the house blessed. And a lot of times when you have people come in to bless your house, it makes it worse. So and I don't know why that is. I think that it's because we're all human, and sometimes you get a minister that hits the bottle a little bit too much and has his own attachment on him, or
Sure.
somebody that's maybe has a wife but also has a mistress, and they come in and they're doing the blessings on the house. So I mean, nobody's perfect, but because of the humanness, they come in. So sometimes it exacerbates the problem, which in my case it did exacerbate the problem when I had people come in to try to clear the house because of their own fear. I mean, just they would shake, and then it was obvious that they were scared to death, and they fed off the lush, and it made it worse. So, but anyway, so she had people come in to do the blessing, and multiple times things kept happening in the house, and she even went to the point of cementing her septic tank or something and getting the city water, but even going farther to block the openings because they were claiming that whatever it was coming in through her drains or her plumbing. I got a little kitty cat here climbing up on me. But anyway, so she went to a lot of expense trying to block these things from coming in. And she said that one night she was laying in her bed and the only thing that she could move was her eyeballs. No, you cannot play with that. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Say hello.
Hello.
He just found him on my porch step. So
Name.
anyway,
We need a name.
oh, my daughter named him Beans, of all things.
Beans.
Beans.
Mr. Beans.
Yeah, he's cute.
Because the toe beans. He's got toe beans.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. So, what she said, all of a sudden, I mean, she was in that state of paralysis, and I think we've all experienced this, and of course they have explanations for it, but yeah, it's one thing to have only your eyeballs move, but when you got something dark hovering over you to boot, it's not just some kind of sleep paralysis. There's something else going on. So this lady said that she was awake and she could hear the sound of her child gurgling. The child apparently had asthma or something, but gurgling in the other room, and she wasn't able to get up to go to the room to help the child. And all of a sudden she felt something raping her, and she literally had and she had pictures of it. She literally had bruises that were the color of purple eggplants all down the inside of her legs and she put on a pair of shorts so that she could take the pictures of the bruising and not expose anything that you couldn't show on television. Sure. And she brought these things in and she was showing them. And I'm pretty sure it was the Montel show. It was one of the shows that Sylvia Browne was on. And they were trying to tell her that even at that point in time that she wanted to know what it was. And Father Andrew Calder, who was with Georgia Paranormal, and he has since passed away, may he rest in peace, was with her on the show because he was the investigator and the person trying to do, the blessings after this all happened. But what turned out is she passed out because there was so much pain involved in this rape that was occurring to her that she passed out. But when she woke up in the morning, her child had passed away. And of course she had to go through all of this stuff because they, felt that she had done it, what I mean, type thing. And how do you explain why your insides of your legs are purple? Oh, well, somebody had to have done that to you. I mean, there were no logical explanations, but the sad part was that the child had passed. This was a long, long time ago, but I remember this being on Montel. Also, Father Andrew Calder came to my house to help clear the house, and he was the one that told me the story about this lady. So the telltale sign, and how aggravated he was that on the show that Sylvia Browne did not confirm, because at that time she herself was very accurate in things. However, she hadn't had experience in some things enough to realize that they really did exist. So she was kind of trying to say, no, it could not have been, demonic forces, the universal law. They can't do that. You can tell them to leave. Well, I got news for you, people. Universal law doesn't work. Okay. Not really. Okay. For some things it might, but it for a lot of things that it does not. So I'm telling you, because I tried that too and it did not work. So anyway, but that's kind of where she was at that time. And then later on, she learned more about things and she started writing books about the darker side of things. But these things do exist, and they also, there are things that attach to people. Recently, I've been working with. I've been together on podcasts with Dr. Jerry Marvinsky out of Arizona, and he's been working on a energetic way to help people with schizophrenia because, and he's been doing it for years. And I had connected up with him because with my gift of second sight, I had gone back to school to further my nursing degree. And in that cycle of going back, I had to go take a psych class. And in the psych class, we were taken to different facilities where we had to spend the day with clients and follow them. And we were in this one facility for a whole week, and there was this, and I'll share the story with you if you'd like me to. This goes into mental illness and attachments, if you'd like.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There were 8 nurses and the teacher, and we had gone to this one facility, and it was the intake area. So we literally had to sign papers that if we got hit or bitten or something happened to us, that we couldn't hold the facility responsible. So there was this young woman she looked to be maybe 20 years old. She came up to the group and she pointed at me and she said, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, in that moment, I'm like, oh God, please don't let her be talking to me. I wanted to be Lynn, the student nurse, not Lynn, the weirdo that day. So I'm kind of looking over my shoulder, seeing if anybody's behind me. And the teacher comes in and she ushers us out and she says, "Don't make eye contact, don't speak." So we moved into another area, but it just so happened that myself and another nurse, there were 2 of us that were sent back into the intake area where this young lady was. And they had picnic tables that were bolted to the floor. And my fellow nurse and we were sitting at the table doing our charting, because our patients, they have segments where they go to group things. They go to group counseling, or they have time with their social worker, time with their psychiatrist, or time with their, to take care of their daily activities of daily living. And ours were both away to some of their counseling groups. So it gave us time to do our charting and kind of to read the history on the person. And the young lady comes over and she was not one of our patients, but she came over to the table and she sat down with us. And she had on a pair of shorts and she had on like a tube top so her midriff was showing, and it had thin little spaghetti straps so you could have clear view of her back and her skin and her shoulders and her arms. And this poor girl was covered in claw marks. I mean, she had them coming out of her ear, out of her nose. She was talking about how she heard 25 different voices. And how one of them had a very, very long fingernail that was also clawing the inside of her female parts. And the facility was accusing her of self-inflicting these things. And I'm looking at her, and she also made mention that when she was 10 years old, because there usually has to be a trauma that what I call puts cracks in the windshield. Hey, you. Puts cracks in the windshield. And bear with me one second. I'm going to call my daughter to take this little kitty away. Bear with me.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would put the cat on my head and make it the main focus.
Right. Yeah.
It wants to play with my hair and play with the thing. Take this sweet baby, please. Say hi to everybody. Hello.
Hello.
So anyway, what was I saying? Oh, so I'm looking at this woman, and because I had just to back up, to bring forward, in the house that I purchased that I was never able to move into, my friend Ellen got clawed to the point of bleeding standing in that kitchen. And the claw marks that this young woman had on her looked identical to the ones that Ellen had. And so I'm recognizing them. They look like cat scratches. Like single cat scratches, and they're kind of separated. And she had them in areas that there's no way that she could have done them to herself, because I mean, she had some on her back that were going at angles that she would have had to have been a contortionist to have been able to have done that to herself. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, oh my God, this poor girl, she's covered, literally covered. And I mean, there were lots of them all over her. And she was telling us a story about how she had been molested by her elder or the priest of their church until she was like 14. And then her mother got remarried, and the stepfather started raping her until she was like 16. And then she ran away from home and got into a group that was doing devil worship. And she realized that wasn't the thing for her. And now she's hearing these 25 different voices. And again, when it was schizophrenia, usually there's a trauma that takes place. We have an auric field around us that we have to maintain, and remind me at the end of the show to give everybody some things that they can do to do that are very simple. But when there's a trauma, it creates openings, which I call cracks in the windshield, which allows these bottom feeding spirits that are in the lower ranges. Sometimes they're lost souls that have chosen not to cross over and they choose to attach. And in this case, this young woman was saying that she was hearing the 25 different voices. So as we're sitting there, she's then called away. And when she gets up to walk away, she's probably maybe 10, 12 feet away from me. And I'm looking at her, and on her back, she had these about the size of potatoes, but they were clustered together like grapes over each shoulder, as if they weren't in a bag, but if you can imagine a standard size pillowcase that's clear, it was that big. It was that big, like a Santa Claus bag over each shoulder. And I'm looking at her, and some of them were inverted. So the eyes were on the bottom and the mouth was on the top or sideways. And I'm like, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 different voices. She's got attachments on her back. And so she went away for her thing, and my patient came back. I had to do some things, but I noticed that she was back in her room, and I went and I knocked on her door, and I said to her, I said, listen, what I'm about ready to tell you, if you repeat it, they're going to keep you in here longer. I said, because they'll think that you're crazy. But I believe that you are hearing 25 different voices because you have attachments on your back.
How did she respond to that?
The thing about them is when they're exposed, her face started to get disgruntled, almost like angry, and she turned to walk away from me. And in that moment, normally I would not have done this because I had my own personal things going on, and I have found in removing these things off of people that you have to have a preparation. You can't be sick. You can't be on medication. You can't be drunk. I mean, you have to be fully in alert and oriented and at a higher level, because those things do reduce your energy into a lower level if you're under the influence of anything. So but they were connected on her shoulders with this thing that looked like a twisted horn. It was kind of a brownish tan color and hollow, but it was at the top of her shoulder, and it kind of clipped underneath her armpit. It didn't go all the way around, but because it was raised up a little bit, I took my fingers and I lifted them off. Something just told me to do it, and I did it. And they started immediately falling away, separating, falling to the floor. I started stomping them into the ground, as many as I could. And she turned around and she said to me, it felt like you were pulling grass off my back. She didn't know what I had just done. I kid you not. She felt that I had taken something off, because they have like these roots and tentacle things that kind of attach in, if you could see what I see. So I told her, I said, look, this is a temporary fix. Some of them have rolled over towards your bed. I'm sure that where you're living, you have some infestation in there. Again, this is a temporary fix. When you get out of here, you need to go and find someone that can help clear these things off of you, and get help that way, because again, this is temporary. Lo and behold, about a year later, I'm in Walmart and I'm squatting down looking at candles, and I see these two young women at the end of the aisle, and they're whispering and they're looking at me, and I'm like, my zipper down, I start checking my shoe for toilet paper. I'm thinking, why are they doing that? And all of a sudden I hear one of the young ladies say, I know that that's her. And I thought, well, oh, maybe it's a fan. Maybe it's somebody that's read one of my books and they recognize me. And so the one girl starts to walk over, and she said to me, she said, do you remember me? And I'm looking at her, and she looks so different. When I had seen her in the facility, she was so drained by the energy from her, by these things that were sucking like parasites off of her back, that she had an ashen color almost to her skin. She had very, very short hair. She had weighed a little bit more than she did when I'm looking at her. And here she stands. She's beautiful. She's got this little blonde bob. She's lost weight. She's got her makeup on, and I'm looking, and she said, you're the nurse. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm looking at this young woman, and she said, I did what you said. I went and I got help. She said, and now I'm just on a low dose of medication for anxiety, and I'm off of all of my schizophrenic medication. And she was in a school to become a dental hygienist. So I mean, her life, once those attachments were managed, her life completely turned around, and it was a beautiful thing. So I've been working with, not working directly with, but we're kind of, I've been on shows with Jerry Marvinsky talking about this. I've gotten a lot of people that have contacted me. Yes, I can remove your attachments. I don't do demons, so it's above my pay grade. I can do them. I only do it for family members because I don't like doing it. But these other things that are disembodied souls and things like that, I can help with. In addition to that, being in the facility, those people that had addictions carried a different type of attachment on them. I call them archons. They look like spiders, crabs, or lizard type things. And I say that because they anchor in at the shoulders, and their feet kind of go where the hips are. It's like an anchor where the hips are, and they fit like a neat little backpack on the backs of people. The thing that is very, that's the same about all of them is that they have a head that is much smaller in proportion to the body of that. And the reptilian ones sometimes have a lizard-like tail that will curl, or they have a human buttocks with no tail. And but these heads, they have like a fin thing that attaches at the top of the head and goes out to the nape, and it's floppy. So this thing can turn its head all the way around. And if it's and I say that because the difference between schizophrenic attachments and addictive attachments is that addictive attachments are invited. Schizophrenic attachments are not. They are parasites that latch on to people. People that have addiction, they've kind of created situations where they've invited that in. So when a person has an addiction, the only way to get the attachment off, and I want to make mention too, I mentioned about the fin thing and the smaller head, and they usually align up with the head, but they sometimes will peek over the shoulder, and they also whisper into people's ears. I mean, you're not hearing voices in your head, it's voices whispering into your ear. So before that archon type thing can detach, but it never completely goes away, which is why its recovery is very, very hard for people with addictions, and they constantly have to have a support system or go through their 12-step program or whatever it is that they're doing to maintain their sobriety, because the archon, just like any other negative parasitic attachment, wants, they've got a good thing going. If they've been riding around on the back of somebody who, and which reminds me to take me back to pain at some point, because sometimes people become addicted to pain medication because of attachments that are creating pain that are on them. But I'll go into that more. I want to go back to this really, really quick. So when a person becomes sober, the archon will detach, but it never leaves their area. It never, it stays around them, constantly trying to goad them to take that drink, take that pill. Oh, a little sip won't hurt. Oh, just taste it with a spoonful. Trying to get them started, or, smoke weed as a gateway to, to whatever else pill taking that you're doing. And I'm not saying, that some things, if people don't have that addictive nature, that they're going to have this problem, but it's the people that are full blown, where the addiction is creating job loss, it's creating divorce, it's creating infidelity, that's creating rippling effect with sexually transmitted diseases and all kinds of that. That is the kind of addiction that I'm talking about. Somebody that has a glass of wine with dinner, that's different. So anyway, they do detach, but they remain in their realm. And I say this because my brother, for instance, he had a drug and alcohol problem. It was dual, and his archon was one of the reptilian ones, and I have a picture of it. I drew a picture of what they look like in my book. And it would precede him whenever he would come. I would see it. My children, who were also gifted, we would see it, and it would cling on the ceiling, and it would jump from the corners and across, but it never would really come down below 3 feet onto the wall. And it stayed above. And my children, and when it would be up in the corners, it would turn its head all around, and that flap thing would come over its face. And that's how I know that it was floppy, not rigid like a dolphin fin. It was like a hanker, one of those kerchief things flopping over its face. So anyway, I mean, my children would say to me, "Mom, I think Uncle Ray's going to be coming to visit." And I kid you not, lo and behold, within 24 hours, I'd get a call that he and his wife were packing up their Winnebago and that they're going to be heading up towards South Carolina to see my mother and I. My mother was alive at the time. And when he would arrive, the thing would disappear. But when I would go to his house to visit, I would also see it in his house, jumping from the corners. Now, he was sober for 20 some odd years, but that thing never left him, waiting for the opportunity to reattach, because they are creatures of habit and they don't like change. So when they have a good thing going, they try to keep that ball rolling. So I've been, like I said, I've been doing shows about that with Jerry Marvinsky. If anybody is having a problem that way, you can reach out to me at my website, www.lynnmonet.com, and I can direct you to some help that way. And also just the understanding of how it all works sometimes gives you the motivation to do, because trust me, if you would see half of the things that I see on people, you'd run screaming, wetting your pants. You wouldn't want something like that on you. And not only that, these souls that are still wandering around, these bottom feeders, when they choose not to cross over, they still have all of their senses. Yes, they can smell too, but it's not like an olfactory smell through your nose. It's more of a memory recall. They still have their mental illness, they have addiction, they have the cause of death showing. And I mean, there are many, many times that I've walked into pubs and I'll see dead people standing around somebody having a drink, just trying to sniff their drink. Even if I saw one guy, there was this couple, they were getting romantic at a bar, and this lady had a rock glass with something in it, and this man was headless, and he was holding his head on the bar so that his head could be over the drink, kind of smelling at the drink kind of thing. I mean, and people on their cigarette breaks too. You wouldn't believe how many dead people are standing around you just trying to be in that smoke. And people, if you like your peep shows and you think that have that moment alone, you probably have a fan club watching with you, and you should probably be charging admission for what you're doing in there. So
I promise I don't have that problem.
So yeah, well, I'm just saying, people don't realize that these, I call them bottom feeders, or they're just lower level souls that just haven't elevated their energy to cross over, and they linger here for those things. And not that people with addiction linger here, they can cross over and get help, but a lot of them choose to linger here because of the addiction. So yeah.
Wow.
It really kind of is like, I mean, as the resident Sasquatchers Bible expert, sorry, it's me. Things like shaitans or jinns, or even what we call Satan, or like, that evil presence. It's very reminiscent of what that is, right? Like something that's always on your back, on your shoulder, something that always exists, that's trying to push you, in the wrong direction of where you should be going. And I mean, I think we're probably, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but I would assume we're probably all tempted at some point by some of these creatures, right?
Oh yeah,
Or
definitely.
you don't see it. You don't see any here with me, do you?
Well, your picture is about this big, so I can't I can't see, and you're one
It's
on
like
top.
everything
So I mean,
else.
what? No, it's not,
Oh,
that one.
Drew,
Ooh, I won't go there.
dude,
TMI.
we've went like 70 episodes without an inappropriate joke like that, and you just blew that out of the water, man. Come on.
Well, I've been waiting.
Well, I will let you know that if anybody would know, it would be Drew. So
Yeah.
Well, I actually heard that his nickname is Kickstand, but we won't go there. So we'll just kind of cover that one back up. But no, and not to get off the beaten path of the whole spirit and woo woo and scary thing, because I can take you into a lot of other things, but these things are real. They do exist. And like you were saying, yes, it's all part of that darker that realm. And they use some of the similar portals too, to even travel through and those sorts of things, which is a whole nother that's a whole nother show, talking about portals and how they travel through the veils. And Sasquatch, I call them skunk ape. That's what we call them in Florida. Same thing, Bigfoot, they're all the same thing. But and some alien things used also as well, and even some of the cryptid type things. They all exist, people. They all do. And so, but with that being said, I did write that in the second book. I talk about that, those scenarios of things that have happened. And in all of my books, I put a self-help section in the back. The first book, it's how to take pictures properly in order to determine whether you have something or not before you move in, so that you don't have to move in and lose your money and move back out or get stuck there like I did in the third book, 111 Becadon Drive. So, and I don't know how much more time we have. I know that we're at an hour, so I didn't know if you wanted to leave it there for me to keep going.
You know what? We usually hit an hour. I would love to have you back. We talked
why don't we
about
save
doing
that?
a live.
Save it for the live. Yeah.
Okay.
We can pick up on the live. So anybody listening right now, you have already listened to part 1. You have rushed over to part 2, and you will now set your calendars for part 3, which we all talked about doing as a live special. And I think that's a perfect spot to start with when we do that live.
Yeah.
Before we do wrap up, I wanted to point out a couple of things. JC, do you recall many moons ago when we had Dr. Rita Luis on?
Yes.
And she was discussing, now she is a psychic, and she described a lot of the same things that you just talked about tonight, but she described them slightly differently. And I'm sure it was just coming from a place of belief more so than disagreement. But she talked a lot about chakra, and how we have this chakra that's around us, and that there are these entities that are constantly trying to just beating on our chakras. And when you started talking about the bottom feeders, as you called them, I started to think about what she said. And for the longest time on Sasquatchers, we would run into this synchronicity where one thing would just jump over to the next. And it was almost like a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon of our show, where everything
Minus
kind
Kevin
of
and Bacon
fell in place with one another. And that just kind of jumped back tonight. And I thought that was something to address, because for a really long time, our show did experience that. And I want to remind everybody about that. So when you were talking about that, I thought it drew a lot from other conversations that we've had. So it lends more credence. Like, this is not something that you could have just made up on the fly, because people, even with different belief systems, have described the exact same thing that you've described. So I think it lends validity to what you're saying. So I wanted to point that out. And also, there's a film, I was looking it up while you're describing it. It's called Shudder. It's just a generic mainstream horror movie starring Joshua Jackson. It came out in, I think, 2008. But a lot of what you're describing actually occurs in this film as well. So if anybody's interested in checking out a studio horror flick, that
I'm gonna write that down, because I've never seen it.
It's
Yeah.
not bad either.
It's called Shutter, and I believe the reason it was called that is because the person who's starting to pick up on the fact that there are these attachments on people are seeing it through shutters of photographs.
Yes.
So
Well, and you can sometimes you can see them on shutters of photographs. Yeah. Anyway, that again, that's a whole nother show. But well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no,
Well,
I was just throwing that out there that if this subject matter hit you in any way, shape, or form, and you wanted to maybe explore it further, there actually is a horror film that touches on some of these things. So, yeah,
So
check that out.
I got two things. One a statement, one a question. The first one, I wanted to go back to when you said that you left skid marks on that street, because listening to the story, I definitely left skid marks in my pants.
I thought I smelled something funny.
Just so everybody knows, I had that teed up and written down here in my notes this entire time for the last hour. Second thing, you asked us, so what can people do aside from, like, you know, how do we protect ourselves from this stuff? You know, just like everyday people, like, what do we do?
Okay, well, a couple of things. Demonologist Nathaniel Gillis, which I'll be happy to hook you up with. You will love having him on your show. Iron bracelets. You need to wear an iron bracelet on your left hand. You could get them from Etsy. They're like $12 to $18. I never take mine off unless I'm going through an airport, and I stick it in my purse just to cross through security, and then I put it back on. It's important that it's on your left hand. Iron are the things that they would put around graveyards to hold spirits in back in the olden days. Some of them still do.
Mhm.
The other thing is I recommend to people with these things to be sure to take salt baths. As you were mentioning the chakras, I call it the aura. It's kind of the same thing because the chakras are within the aura and it's all one big piece. So when to make sure that you don't have cracks in your windshield from surgeries or from traumas or even from overstress, where it thins and gets closer, it's you supposed to be this big huge light that's way around you like your egg, that thing that people talk about, that if somebody walks into it, even if you're not looking at them, you can feel it behind you that somebody's walked up, you know, type thing. It's that same sensory energetic bubble thing. But a lot of people don't have bathtubs to take their thing, and you can definitely you can email me and I can send you the little bath ritual thing that you do, and it's with prayer with psalms because they hate psalms, and or you can use whatever prayer you want if that's not your forte as far as biblical, if you know go through some other type of religious thing, but it is some form of a protective prayer. Otherwise, you take a little bit of sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. You take just a pinch, just 10 grains even, and you sprinkle it in each of your shoes. Now, before you do that, because salt is also an energy, it forms in perfect little cubes all on its own. But we're energy, it's energy, everything is energy. So you need to program it. So you take it, you put it in your hand, and you just simply, you say a prayer, you know, I'm going to place this salt in my shoe for added cleansing of my auric field, to heal my physical body, to, you know, to protect me from negativity, coming at me type thing, and to keep my field clear throughout the day. And so, you know, any attachments have to detach or those sorts of things. And you wear it in your shoe. So you're walking around with that energetic release from the salt in your shoe all day long, which is filling also your auric field and sealing those gaps. So yeah, it does work. You probably will notice a difference almost right away with even how people are responding to you. Also, when in doubt, if you are in a situation, and again, this is we're going to have like 5 shows by the time we're done. But things that I've had to learn recently with dealing with elementals and also with some of these reptilian, creepy, cryptid things that come around. Some things prayer doesn't work. Like an elemental that was here before the time that religion was about. I mean, they were here at the time the earth was created. If you go in to clear a house with a haunting or an attachment off of somebody, which elementals don't usually attach, but I'm just saying, in a house, and it's not it's not a disembodied soul that's in there. It's an elemental. They don't leave, you do. So there are different ways to deal with these things. And for one thing is that they feed on the lush of negative emotions. So it's very, very important, even if you have skid marks in your pants like he does, that you pretend that you don't. They can't so much, they go by your actions more so even than by your thoughts, because it's still questionable if they can read your mind or not. They do telepathy once you've crossed over, and they can convey that way. But when they haven't, nobody has been able to determine whether they really can or not. So you fake it until you make it, and you start humming a hymn, or you start laughing, or they can't stand joy, they can't stand love, they can't stand happiness. It's a repellent to them. So even if you sit just for a moment and you close your eyes and you focus on your heart like a pink beam of sonar rings coming out, and you envision this coming from your heart, aiming it at the person that's being nasty to you, aiming it into the room if you are frightened that there's something in there that shouldn't be. If they are of a lower level or of darkness, they will run out of that room like there's a bad stench in the room. If they are of angelic means or even elemental means, the light side of it is there's a dark side too, but the light side of it, they relish in it. They don't leave. So that's also a way to determine whether you have a real positive spiritual being that's attending you, which you wouldn't be afraid of to begin with, because usually they're very beautiful meetings, very warm and loving, and versus if it's not. But that's a way to determine, because right now with the veils thin and the vibration changing on the earth, there are a lot of different things that are mimicking things that are familiar to us, so that they can be invited to stay, and they have to be invited to stay. I know that my son experienced something about a month ago where he thought it was my mother who has passed and also was around him as one of his guides, but she showed up at his bedside at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, Grandma, what are you waking me up for? I got to go to work tomorrow. You need to go, come see me another time. And when she turned, she had this long reptilian tail. So he knew that it wasn't her. It was something presenting as her, hoping that he would invite it to stay. So even psychics are going to tell you that are on the energetic wavelines, that a lot of them are having to double check souls, especially those that talk to people on the other side, to ask specific questions to ensure that they actually have that person and that it's not something mimicking, because of this weird time frame that we're in right now. So when in doubt, love conquers all. It will shove away the demons, anything dark, the reptilian, none of them can stand it. So when in doubt, use that. And they can't take it. It makes them wrinkle up into little boogers. So empower yourself and do that. Put your salt in your shoes, get your iron bracelet on your left wrist, and radiate love out wherever you go, and it will keep you clear.
Those are some good tips that I'm going to start using myself. I'll make
I got
room.
6 pounds of salt in my shoe already.
Well, yeah, and again, everybody, it's not, you don't have, more is not better with this, because then you're going to end up having like cracks in the skin of your feet.
Right.
You just need a little, like even 6 grains or 10 little square grains just sprinkled in each shoe. And again, don't forget the prayer part with the intention. You've got to direct it into the direction and be specific. You can't just go and say, I want a hamburger, and then the universe provides you with a hamburger, and you're like, well, where's the cheese? And so then you're like, well, I want a hamburger with cheese, and then you get the hamburger with cheese and there's no bun. No, I want a hamburger with cheese, with onion. I want it grilled. I want ketchup. I want mustard. I want mayonnaise, and I want it to be hot. You've got to be specific with these things when you do channel anything and put energy into it and prayer into it. So make sure that you ask for what you want.
To touch on the Psalms very quickly, anybody interested who wants to to chant sing these psalms, look up the Gregorian psalms in English, and they're very tonal, and they're like almost natural, I guess you should say. Like they're natural with like the human tone of voice in that. So look those up. They're simple to learn, and I think the psalms will take you a long way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, please do. Go with that. So
Yeah, and if you're
anyway.
like me and anytime the floor creaks, you invoke Jesus, go ahead and, use all these tips. Before we hit the outro, I want you to go ahead and get your plugs in again. I'm, they've heard them already on the last episode, but just in case somebody decided to get all crazy and wild and listen to this without part one, go ahead and do your plugs. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
Okay. My website is www.mynameLynnMonet.com. I have 4 books out right now. I've got Omnipresent, which is about the house that I never moved into. Omnipresent, What Happened Next, which is part of the story that we were talking about tonight, including the mental illness and the attachments. The 3rd book that's going to be coming out here within the next 3 months is the 111 Becadon Drive, which is the story about the ghost that was going from townhouse to townhouse. And before we do that show, I will send you the pictures. So you can post them somewhere. You can just see them for yourself. And then I have a 4th book in the Omnipresent series, which is going to be a series of 5 called Omnipresent Gnome Place Like Home, where even in the case of, like you were mentioning, invoking Jesus Christ, that's always a good go-to. However, when it comes to elementals and fae, it doesn't work. So if that doesn't work, you do the love light. So you can, it is basically the Christ light anyway, because of it's coming from your heart. So, but somehow that light, it just, we'll go into that more when we get into the book about Gnome Place Like Home, because there's more detail to it than that. But yeah, always invoke Jesus and the love light from your heart. The other thing is I have a book also called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. I've been a nurse for 40 years. I had my birthday Friday. I just turned 61. So, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me. Thank you. I still love my birthday.
I heard 31, so.
Oh, I like you. No, somebody actually in the comments on one show, they had made mention, oh, well, it's called Botox and fillers. And it's like, look, I can't afford those. And I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole anyway, because once you start, you can't stop doing those.
Yeah.
And, so, it is what it is. It's good lighting and makeup. So, The Colors of Heaven is a beautiful, beautiful story about death and dying. And I wrote the book as an end-of-life care nurse for almost 20 years. I've seen hundreds of people pass away. There's consistencies and beautiful things that they come back and talk about, as well as I've seen people leaving their bodies at the time of death. And I wrote the book hoping to take the stigma of death and dying away. And that is a beautiful story. It's out on Amazon. It's on my website. If you want your books personalized and autographed, getting them through my website would be the appropriate place where I can sign them for you. They cost the same. They might even be a little bit cheaper on my website, but you can, if you're more of an Amazon, PayPal kind of person, you can get them on Amazon. You can order them through Barnes and Noble. I think even Walmart has them now. Some of the books they have now, if not, they will get them for you. So yeah, and then I have a book that I also wrote that has nothing to do with any of this, called The Gap: What Else Your Adolescent and Teen Needs to Know. And it's about that gap from the birds and the bees to human trafficking, where it talks about dating and putting your phone away. It talks about not wearing smelly sneakers out on your first date, because no matter how beautiful or handsome you are, smelly shoes are not attractive, and what to do if a condom breaks. Not that I'm encouraging your children to have sex, but if they are having sex, they need to know what to do if a condom breaks to protect their future. And there are measures that they can take without prescription that they can buy in the grocery store, even at 3 years old, without a prescription, but they have to have about $80 because it's expensive to stop ovulation. So yeah, all that stuff, and how to get in and out of a trunk. from the inside, just in case you get stuffed in one. You know, there's where the pull is and what it looks like and what a tie iron is, so that you can whack somebody in the head if you're abducted. I mean, all that stuff is in there, including how to clean out a refrigerator from top to bottom and turn it back on afterwards. So
I need
yeah.
that one. So
So there's a lot. But anyway, that's me. That's how you can find me. Oh, and my show on Gaia just came out last week. I did a segment on Beyond Belief with George Norrie on Gaia. I will send you the link. They're going to be sending me a link where you can get a free 7-day trial. So if you go in through my link, you can get that free 7-day trial to watch anything you want on Gaia. But then if you go through my link, they also then see that I have people coming in through my link and it looks good for me. So I will do that
cool.
if you don't mind sharing it out, and anybody
sure.
can use it. So I did my little TV jaunt there. So
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. We'll definitely we'll share that and more. Everybody, I hope you are as intrigued as we are. I cannot wait for part 3, and we're just now finishing part 2. This has been just as fascinating as part 1, and I really look forward to meeting with you again. Thank you again for joining us.
You are a
Thank-
treasure, Lynn. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank everybody listening for the dedication. Thank you for the recent uptick in our merch sales and everything that's going on as far as all the positive energies and stuff. Let's keep it rolling when we hit our live episode with Lynn, yet to be scheduled. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for squatching and enjoy the new outro.
Bye.
The preceding program has been brought to you by the Watchers Podcast Network. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends to help grow our network. Check us out on all social media platforms, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thanks for your support.